So I'm normally behind the camera, so this is a lot for me. So, but I wanted to say, feel free to ask any questions. It's a small enough group. We can probably have more of a discussion than a presentation. And then there's a lot of bike trails in San Diego, but I'm going to focus more on the core of San Diego. So, and then I want to focus on San Diego's bicycle challenges, which there are a lot. I want to note that there's a tension between cyclists and drivers. This guy brings a sword on his bike, so I don't want to bash on cyclists. That's individual problems, not solutions or awareness. But let's go back to a quick history. This is 1930s San Diego. You can see Ocean Beach there, and then Pacific Beach up there. What you can see though is it's spread out, it's sparsely connected, and there's a lot of vast emptiness. Going on, this is downtown. You can see that there is, let me see, lights. There we go. You can see that downtown it is very multimodal, especially in this photo in the lower corner over here. You can see that and then up here, you can see there's cyclists, there's horses, there's automobiles, there's pedestrians. It was a kind of a early solution that was forgotten because San Diego just grew so quickly, and it grew with the automobile. In fact, in 126 years since 1900, it's grown 9,300%. And to put that in context, New York in that time only grew 280%. Chicago, almost 500%. San Francisco, 1,000. And then the closest that I can find is LA, which only grew 7,000%. So you can see how much growth has happened in such a short period of time. This is a picture of Qualcomm in 1969, right before it opened. But I think the people of San Diego recognize that. We have Temporary Paradise, which is Friends of San Diego's favorite reference material. They advocated very early on that a great way to preserve San Diego and its neighborhoods is a complete trail system. And they talked about this quite extensively. There's lots of blurbs in the book. But what they found is that if you have a trail network that is either on the mesas or in the valleys, it's flat. So there's really not a lot of hills or elevation change that you have to contend with. And so that, and it being a very temperate climate, and it's kind of a cyclist paradise. All you need is to be able to get between the valleys and the mesas. They also talked a lot about how we have an extensive road network, and it could be used in a lot of different ways. And this shows an early sketch of the Coronado Bridge with cyclists going across it. The city took notes. This is an early photo of, actually it's not that early, but the Bike the Bay. And then there's a strong cyclist community in San Diego. You can tell this was in 1972, just before the 805 opened. And there was a lot of chaos on that day because so many people were going so fast down the hills, but everybody loved getting on the freeway and just riding their bike across the valley. So that's kind of the history. We've gone from sparse to a lot of infill density, but it's all been around the car. So in 2010, that's about when I moved here. Sandag put together the Writing to 2050 regional plan because they were thinking about it, because as you add more people, you're going to need more ways to get around. You can't just keep adding lanes to a highway and making residential districts further and further out, because that just keeps the congestion high. It doesn't solve the solution. It's also about the same time that I moved to San Diego. That's an early photo of me on top of Mount Soledad. I don't take photos of me on the bike because that's dangerous, but and that's my first bike that hasn't been stolen yet. And it's now my cheap bike. And I'm no stranger to a good bike ride. Last month I went around the bay. I went down to PB to get some donuts for lunch, and then 2 to 3 days a week I will commute to work by bike. So, but going back to the regional plan, they have 5 goals. The first one is to increase cycling in San Diego. Second is improving bicycle safety. Third is encouraging development of complete streets, and that means streets that everybody can use in the way that they want to. Reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and then increase community support for bicycling. And that's a lot of awareness, and that's what I'd like to bring to it, is that cyclists exist in San Diego, even if we want to ignore them. And then another thing that I want to touch on before we get into the plan is there's 5 different types of cycle lanes. And the ideal is a class 1. It's expensive, but you are biking without anybody else on the lane. Class 2 is what you see with like the little chevrons and the bike on the road. It's sharing the street with other cars. Class 3 is when we have the bike lanes. And then class 4, which is relatively new, is a cycle track, and that's where we start to protect the bike lanes from the cars, whether it's putting the parking in between the driving or just ways to improve the safety for cyclists. And another big thing that has recently come out is class 5, which is a bicycle boulevard, and I will touch on these, but basically it's to not eliminate traffic, but to encourage cyclists on a slower street. So it's off a main artery road, and I definitely could use this. So this was 2010. My house is approximately here in Talmadge. I work downtown. You can see with those bike paths, I could kind of get from there, then I have to get onto El Cajon, which I don't think anybody wants to ride their bike on El Cajon. And then I can zigzag down to 30th, and then over, and then down Pershing, and then into downtown. Let's see. All the green is just a chevron on the street. There's no bike lane. The blue is a bike lane, and then the orange is where we see the actual bike paths. You can see that the new development down south, and then this map's cut off, but the new developments up north, there are much more bike lanes just because they were thinking about that when the developments were added in the 90s. And in 2010, there were about 1,340 miles of acceptable bike paths in San Diego. So the goal is to really improve the bike paths. I don't know how well this is reading, but it's trying to get the regional connectors all connected. So you can see over here in 2010, there's like some connections, but there's a lot of empty spaces. And here we're trying to fill that in and really trying to make sure all the bike lanes are connected, because if you can only bike a quarter of the way on a bike lane, and then you have to get back onto a busy road, then it's not a very safe solution. So I didn't see a lot of changes until Laura Shin died in 2021, trying to ride up Pershing to get to work. I think that was kind of a pivotal moment for at least the city of San Diego to really say, we need to make changes to make it easier to bicycle in San Diego. And it was a very sad moment. Laura was riding on a class 2 bike lane, so it was beside the cars. It's unprotected, so a car just drifted into her lane and pushed her off, a drunk driver, and they killed her. Yeah. So, a theoretically safer time to be on a bike.
Pershing has been transformed since then.
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. So, fast forward, 2025 kind of status report. I think we can all remember all the Lime bikes and how terrible they were because they were just everywhere and they blocked everything. But since 2010, there's been 560 new miles of bike lanes added. Or bike routes added, I should say. And this is Sandag's map, and you can see that there's a lot of in construction, a lot of coming into construction, a lot of plans still. So there's a long ways to go. But they have added quite a bit of new lanes. At the same time, New York City, they added 1,300 miles of bike lanes.
Exactly.
So one thing that really pushed New York City into adding them is they had a 9th Avenue pilot, and it was 6 blocks of biking in Chelsea District. It was really highly controversial because one thing it did is it created this protected bike lane. You can see the bollards, you can see the striping. It removed a lane of traffic. It cut down on parking. And so many people were worried that there'd be less access for businesses, narrower streets, more traffic. But within about 2 years, the latent demand for bicyclists came on board. And the city actually noticed that the amount of traffic on 9th Avenue went down. More bikes means less cars, less demand for public transit. Another thing is all the protected lanes reduced the accidents by 48%, which means that bikes were less likely to be hit by a car. Cars were not turning out, they provided new turn lanes for cars, so they weren't turning out of a driving lane. And there may have been a reduction in parking, but at the same time, cyclists go a lot slower. So local businesses actually had improved sales because the cyclist is more likely to stop. Oh, say that's nice in the window and go in and get it. This is like the impetus that propelled New York City to build so many bike lanes so quickly, because they can't just keep adding more lanes to the roads. There's no room for that. They'd have to build double-decker roads and triple-decker roads. And they want to be a growing city. So this is an easy way for them to add ways for people to get around, add mobility, and it really works best when it's in a dense urban environment. So San Diego is getting denser, but there's still the opportunity to create mobility for different types of transit. So one study that I've done, and this is on the Mead Bicycle Boulevard here, and this is me coming home at 5:20 on a Thursday. I can take Mead across here, and it'll take 16 to 20 minutes in traffic. it's busy, or I might get lucky and get on El Cajon and it will take me 12 minutes, but it could also take me 30 minutes to get to the same spot. So the development of the Meade Bicycle Boulevard, it consistently allows traffic to flow, because instead of you going from 0 to 50 to 0 and turning, you have a lot slower traffic, but you have the roundabouts, which doesn't stop the traffic. It allows people to continue to flow. And then San Diego is also working on more bicycle boulevards. This morning I was driving around getting some groceries, and I was on University, and there's a section right over here in City Heights that they've started to build the bicycle boulevard along University. And the goal is to keep El Cajon as the main transit artery, but to allow for different people, pedestrians, increased pedestrian safety, bicycles, and just increased mobility across the mesa. And this is all on the mesa, so it's all flat. So this is the 2026 bike map. You can see the boulevards that they've started to address, and they're trying to develop more. They're not great, except Meade. That's probably the best example. But my bike route is now very connected to get from my house to work downtown. And you can see that just in general, there's just so many more connections. National City and Chula Vista, they're really trying to build out the plateau, Hillcrest all the way through City Heights. They're trying to add density through Mission Valley. Pacific Beach was already pretty good, but you can just see there's a lot more infrastructure for bicyclists. And I think the bulk of them are still Class 2 bike lanes. So there's how many people here drove and how many people rode their bike because of parking. I didn't want to pay for parking. I didn't know it was a thing, but we already talked about that.
It's a thing.
It is a thing, yeah. I didn't want to bring my nice bike though because of bicycle thefts. How often do you see missing tires or deconstructed bikes? So I brought my cheap bike, the one that hasn't been stolen yet. Because the parking, if we're here, there's not really a dedicated parking spot. I attached it to a railing, but I know the city will ticket me if I leave it there for too long. Going back to some good things about this is the Meade Bike Boulevard. You can see the nice roundabouts, the protected or the lanes off to the side. You can see at the traffic lights there's areas where the bicycles can get off and press a button to change the signals. And it's certainly better than riding on El Cajon, which technically is a bike lane. And I don't want to get run over by a bus because they're scary. And there's probably 30 to 40 people every morning that I ride that are also commuting to work on Meade that I see. And that's just a short part of my commute, but the cyclists are out there. There's still a lot of inconsistencies in the bike paths though. This is one of my areas right at Upison Park over here near where we are today. You're in a nice bike lane. They've made a really nice bike lane along Park Avenue. You get to Upis and all of a sudden the bike lane kind of, what's going on there? You see, oh, you get here, where'd the bike lane go? And then you have to ride like hell to get ahead of the traffic before they run you over. So, because they have to go from one lane to two lane to one lane before the bike lane starts again. So those inconsistencies discourage bikers. That's actively making it more difficult to get around. And the city has worked on the bike lane on both sides of this intersection, but why haven't they addressed the intersection here? Those inconsistencies, though, discourage biking. There have been a lot of new bike paths added. You can see here, 5th Avenue, it has nice protected bike lanes. 4th Avenue, same thing. There's bike routes and good signage, so you know where you're going. The Bayshore Bikeway, that's a hot mess of construction and bike lanes that just disappear, but they've been adding slowly and consistently bike paths. Pershing, this was at the opening day in 2022. So it's part of the consistency is part of growing the city is as things develop, as new roads are getting repaved or changing, that the city is actively looking at adding bicycle lanes as a way to get around. Some of the bad, this is Fairmont Avenue. These were put in, the striping and the bike lane technically was put in less than a year ago. And about every other week, my partner tells me that there's a new stanchion that has been run over and taken out. I'm not going to get to that, even though, like, this is, okay, fine, that's there, but I'm not even going to get there because I'm not going to cross all the SDSU students going up Montezuma, 2 lanes of traffic to get from there to there. So those kind of inconsistencies are really difficult to navigate if you don't know what you're doing. Another thing is Meade kind of just drops me off at the top of outline here. There's no instruction. It's a bike path, or not a bike path, it's a bike route. But it just ends, and then you're on this very congested area right here where City Heights and Talmadge and everything's trying to get down to Fairmont. This is a few more things. Is people don't quite understand what the bike lanes are for, and a lot of times they're used for parking. Got a nice parking enforcement parked in the bike lane. Oftentimes you'll see trucks parked there, cars will park there, Ubers are really bad about it. This guy in North Park here is just sitting in the bike lane drinking a beer. Very convenient if you're trying to get around. And then the city has this weird thing about closing the bike lanes for construction. Well, they spent all this money on 4th and 5th Avenue to build these bike lanes out, have protected routes, and then you can't go more than 7 blocks without being pushed back into traffic. Well, traffic's also getting congested, condensed. So to get around this, you are pushed into traffic that is already being congested, trying to get through to get to the other side and continue your route. It just makes it for a very difficult way. And so currently I don't even take 5th Avenue when I head home because it's too dangerous. I try to find a different route.
They're putting a new storm drain in Hillcrest on 5th Avenue, and they've ripped out a lot of the work that they did to install the bikeway.
Yeah, that's another thing is the city sometimes reverting back because it's cheaper. And we have a budget issue as the parking notes. Some of the good is the electric bikes are really great for San Diego because we were taking this perfect climate and relatively flat. The biggest challenge is getting up the hills. Well, electric bikes are cheaper than ever, more powerful than ever, and the hills are not an issue anymore. I can make it to work on a bike in the same amount of time that it takes me to drive, and I arrive right to the office. I don't have to park in a garage. I'm not sweaty because the motor is helping out, and it's just a very convenient way to get around San Diego. I also, it's kind of a good thing and a bad thing in my opinion. There's a lot of teenage gangs on electric bikes. They're not entirely aware of all the traffic issues, and they are kind of a nuisance, especially to drivers, and in general, their safety isn't really at the foremost of their thoughts because they don't have a frontal cortex yet. But
fully developed.
Developed one, yeah. But I actually think it's a really good thing that they're all on electric bikes because they're building a habit now to get around. So you see teenagers that are more mobile than ever because they can get from school to home, they can get from school to practice, they can do different things that aren't reliant on a car and aren't reliant on having a parent driving them around in a car. So I think, yes, there's teenage gangs on bikes, but I think it's a good thing long term. And I think it helps, even if it is somewhat negative, it helps bring awareness to the cycling community that it exists out there. So how do we move forward? We need to keep developing the bike systems. And the White House currently is deeming bikes hostile to cars, and a lot of the grants have gone away for bike lanes in the United States. Sandag was relying a lot on that, so it's a huge funding cut, and it's kind of a bummer for something that is actually fairly inexpensive in the long term. We need to remember that the city isn't being cheap, it's just huge. And we are in a budget crisis. And what I mean by this is that the city developed in the time of the car, it was interested in getting cars around as quickly and as efficiently as possible. And that cyclists are they weren't the forethought of city planners when the city was developing. And we've added this county of San Diego is significantly larger than it was in 1900. And yeah, it's, and that San Diego is a bicycling paradise. And the more people that are out and being seen on bicycles, commuting to work on bicycles, the more awareness it is, the more that it puts that seed of thought into other people's brains. Maybe I can take this bike lane to go get a coffee or ride around and do something fun, get some exercise. I kind of want to end on that is everybody has a place to go. We all are taxpayers, and so we all deserve equal rights to use the road. And that it's just, yes, cyclists can be frustrating. I get frustrated with them, but we all need to get somewhere, and just having a little bit of grace in that can go a long ways. There's a few ways, big local groups in San Diego that advocate for a lot of bicycling. Bike San Diego is focused more on San Diego, and then the Bike Coalition is for all of the county. This is more for just the city. And Bike San Diego was a really big part of pushing Pershing Avenue and getting that development and making it a safer place to be on a bike. That's all I have. Any questions?
We'll turn on the lights.
Yeah.
Do you have to have a driver's license or be of a certain age to do those electric bikes?
Not in California right now. I know Florida is looking at having a driver's license. It probably will become a thing because a lot of times the electric bikes will go as fast as a scooter, which the gas-powered scooters are limited to like 35 miles an hour. Electric bikes can easily do, some of them can easily do that. More than likely, there's different classes of electric bikes. So the class 1 will go up to 20 miles an hour, and that probably will not require a license, but class 2 and 3, which go up to higher speeds, may require a license.
I live in Claremont off Claremont Drive, and they totally restrike that.
Yeah.
But up from the bay up to Balboa, most of it is, the bikes are at the curb, then there's parking lane, and then a lane of driving. But then you get north of Balboa, and it's driving, bike, and parking. Why do they switch it like that?
There could be so many reasons for that. Ideally,
It's confusing.
it is confusing. Ideally, it's the curb, bike lane, and then parking. And I know a lot of people don't like that because it's putting the parking right next to the driving lane. But at the same time, the parking was always next to the driving lane. It's just moved out into the street a little bit more. It could be the street got narrower. There was a different thing that they had to avoid underground. There's a lot of different reasons why they would change that. It is frustrating and confusing. I do understand that.
What do you make of the bikers using sidewalks in these places?
Technically, I believe that is illegal.
It is illegal.
You have to dismount when you're on a sidewalk. But I think in a pinch, in a dangerous situation, I would rather be on a sidewalk than in the middle of a busy street. And occasionally I do dismount and get onto the sidewalk if I need to.
There's nobody on the sidewalk, so what?
Yeah,
Right?
well, and that's part of building out mobility is making it easier for everybody. If we have, and this goes back to a bigger urban planning context of making tighter communities or transit-centric districts that you don't need to get in your car to go to the grocery store, so you can walk or bike and do other ways to get there.
When I was in Amsterdam, I had 2 surprises. Number one was that babies were in baskets on the front of their parents' bikes, and nobody wore helmets. Nobody. And the other one was that the streets, the sidewalks, were about 8 feet wide. And down the middle of the sidewalk, and the ones that I was walking on had been there a while, so they were gray. There was a sort of a demarcation, but the sidewalk itself was about 4 feet next to the buildings for pedestrians, and another 4 feet was bicycle lane, and then there was a lane for traffic, and then there was the trolley car.
Yeah,
And yes, Amsterdam is older than San Diego. Does San Diego look to Europe and see what works?
I think that's when if I go back to the different types of bike lanes.
But I was walking on bike lane and didn't realize that the street it had aged that much.
Right. So San Diego, when it developed, the sidewalks were only 4 feet wide to start with. And then oftentimes, like I live in a planned district, and my street in front of my house in a quiet residential neighborhood is 60 feet wide. So it is a little sidewalk, 60 feet of street. So I think the US solution is the cycle track here, where you're starting to get the cyclists next to the bike lanes, the cyclists next to the sidewalks. But there's just not enough room to make that sidewalk wider. And it's nice to have the physical separation between the sidewalk where pedestrians are and the bike path where the cyclists are, because they're going at different speeds. And yes, Amsterdam uses those demarcation strips, but I think this is the kind of US approach to a similar problem.
I live just north of Roosevelt Middle School and spend about an hour and a half a day walking around Balboa Park and uptown. And I want to talk about that, but going back to, you mentioned Amsterdam. For 40 years, I was in the travel industry, mainly sending people to Europe. And so I've been to Amsterdam, Copenhagen. Years ago, I went to Beijing, Boulder, Portland. And, you know, I was excited about the idea of San Diego becoming like that, big bicycling city. In downtown, I got involved in the community planning group, chaired it for 3 years after the Great Recession. And we had a 2006 downtown community plan that had lines on paper showing where we would have bike lanes and green streets. And in my time, when construction stopped about 2009, I pushed the redevelopment agency, and we got what became known as the mobility plan, the downtown mobility plan. Mm-hmm. We had a dozen companies applied to do the design for that. We chose Chen Ryan. I was on the selection committee for that, and I was gung-ho in the build it, they will come. Downtown's flat, people can bike around downtown. And son of a gun, you know, over a couple of years, we got that street grid laid out. It's there now. Unfortunately, I must say I'm disappointed with the usage. You know, I see a lot of bike lanes, and again, back here in Uptown, I walk along Martin Boulevard all the time. And it's just surprising to me that we built it, but they haven't come yet. And
right.
So my frustration here is that it feels like we're doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. We're talking about building more and more lanes, but I think you got to a point, which is that your bikes keep disappearing. You know, and I don't think there's a program. I think a lot of people don't bike because there's not safe parking. But the challenge I would have is Balboa Park. I walk around Balboa Park all the time, and I'm shocked at how few people cycle to the park. We got this big, hairy deal going about parking. And why is it that, you know, we've got bike lanes on Park, 4th and 5th. You can get from Talmadge to here fairly easily on bike. And I don't understand why more people are not biking to this. This ought to be kind of ground zero for figuring out what to do next. So I guess I've in other forums, I've challenged the bike community to, you know, to look beyond the bike lanes and look at what is holding us back. Why are we not developing the way great, you know, cycling cities like Boulder have developed?
So I can say there's these inconsistencies really discourage bicyclists. That's one big thing. Theft is another thing. Having safe storage at Balboa Park would be a huge improvement.
You know, they do that on days like Earth Day. They do a bike valet station, 2 of them actually, in the past. And this is what I would advocate. I mean, if you've got money coming in from parking revenue, the bike community should be out insisting on safe bike parking. You can talk about a bike station like you have in some places. It's a kind of a cage thing that's really secure. You can do it just on weekends to do have more of a valet thing. But I would encourage the bike community to focus on Balboa Park. How do you increase? You know, I mean, there was a time when the city thought we were going to have 15% of trips taken by bikes just a couple of years ago. Why not? Let's look at Balboa Park. How do we get 15% of the trips to Balboa Park on bike? What's holding us back?
That's a good question. Because I think San Diego's a great place to ride bikes. I think there's not enough. A lot of people see accidents or see just dangerous situations as they're driving in their car. The car is so convenient. And I think adding things like parking to Balboa Park in a way restricts some access, but in a way it opens up opportunities for cyclists or different ways to approach the park using public transit or just trying to connect the park in a different way. I agree though, if we look at this map, there's a ton of bicycling at Balboa Park. That's very easy, it's ready, it's available, but it just still seems slightly disconnected. You can see this is South Park here. There's really not a lot in there. There's a couple lanes that you're trying to get. Also, I would say that a lot of people that visit Balboa Park don't live in this kind of radius here where it's easy to get to. So if you live up here, you're going to drive.
But a lot of people do live in this radius
Yeah.
that are not biking to the park.
That one I don't have. I think another thing is,
They're walking to the park. That's what.
Well, I am, but.
yeah. Another
not
thing
wrong.
that I want to point out is San Diego has the river trail here, and it is excellent. The San Diego River is a great place to have parks. That's where a lot of cities really develop a really good bike network. But the biggest it's inconvenient to go on that trail down the river there because at every single major road you have to stop and press a button and wait 30 seconds for the light to change before you're able to cross the road. And I think increasing convenience would be a good way to help bicyclists make it easier for them.
Or at the underpasses.
Or
There are,
underpasses.
encampments of homelessness.
Yeah.
that make
Yeah.
Riding those lanes very dangerous.
Yeah, I recently moved into San Diego and I live in the city, so I do a lot of biking and I find a lot to like about it.
Mhm.
But there's one problematic area that it's like, there's a couple of them where you're riding like along Texas Street down, and then like you're in this green lane, and then there's like freeway entrances.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
these cars are driving, they're speeding up to go on the freeway, and there's no light or anything. And I don't know what you can do about it, but it seems awfully dicey.
So one thing that they did down, and I know this because I live there, is this is Fairmont here, and then the 8 goes across this way. They built a really nice bridge over, so you can get over it, and that's really the best way you can do it. Is an underpass.
Person, it's the same thing, like bottom of Pershing, when you go into the East Village.
Yeah, that's still a mess. I don't like going in there because I don't know which road I'm supposed to take, and then I do find the bike path, and there's construction immediately in the bike path. So, yeah.
I do like the wide residential streets, they're nice here.
In Europe and other places where there's more bicycle usage, is there any trend towards having three-wheel bicycles? Yeah, I would like to ride my bike to the grocery store, but I can't buy a six-pack if I do that.
Yeah, so when I was in,
But a three-wheel bike with decent storage and something that I don't have to balance going up the hill when I go home.
well, I think that's a great way to add mobility. Is there are companies, Pedigo makes a tricycle basically. Electric. There's a big thing in the front that you can put all your groceries in. You can put a toddler in there, and so there's a lot of ways. They're expensive and they're much more prominent in Europe. Copenhagen, you see them all over the place. Same in Amsterdam.
Yeah, those are also common in like Tel Aviv and in Tokyo. But I wanted to ask about Copenhagen because don't they have like you're talking about the inconsistencies, especially on a surface street when you come to a lit intersection. Doesn't Copenhagen have a system where the lights change such that the bicyclists have priority?
Right. And that's one thing that is on the Mead Bike Boulevard that I think is helping because in those cities there's so many bikes that they need to address bike congestion. And so they prioritize bike traffic. Another thing is everybody in Europe drives a lot slower than we do, just in general. And then Mead has here these bike lanes. You have a signal here that may or may not work, but you definitely have a push button on the post right here that you can press, and as soon as you press that on most of the lights on me here, it will change almost immediately. It's like a 5-second delay.
And then there's what, like a pedestrian crosswalk and a bike crosswalk?
Exactly, yeah. The pedestrians are here, and then you can see right there the green striping that goes into the bike lane across the street. So you have a protected lane all the way across. You have a way to access the light.
I've also noticed that San Diego is starting to re-engineer all of its pedestrian lighting so that the pedestrian gets to cross before the traffic signal goes off. And I will, and this is probably not legal, but as a cyclist, I will then use that as I get to cross too before.
Yeah, I definitely
cars.
do that when I have to cross El Cajon, because otherwise there's too many cars trying to turn onto El Cajon.
Yeah.
And another issue I think we should talk about is the, I call the lawlessness of cyclists, not gangs, but people just go back, they go the wrong direction, they run through the red lights. It's kind of dangerous to them and to motorists. I think it's one reason why people, both motorists and cyclists, are kind of wary of this. There's no education, there's no rules, nobody enforces anything, and people get hurt, both by cyclists and pedestrians and motorists, because of this lawlessness about bikers.
So yeah, that's definitely a big issue, and it's really frustrating when you're going down Fifth Avenue one way on the bike, and it has the big arrows going the same direction I'm going, and then there's somebody coming towards you, and then not moving over to even the right side to like pass correct, like normally. Sandag and the city of San Diego, they definitely have their they have awareness programs, but their budget's just so small, and they would rather be building bike lanes over building awareness. The Bike SD and the Bike Coalition, they also have awareness campaigns, but again, they're nonprofits, they run off donations, so there's just not a lot of budget. I do think there are a lot of cyclists that run red lights. If I'm on a road that is at an intersection, I'm waiting to get across, and there's no traffic coming, and there's no button, I'm just going to go for it. It happens. Stoplights are also a thing, or not stoplights, stop signs. A lot of cyclists will use them more as a yield sign.
So do the cars.
But so do the cars. So I think that's a learned habit.
California stop.
Yeah.
I just want to say something responding to usage. And we should not count the usage of the bike lanes only by the number of bicyclists that ride on the lanes. One of the things that the bike lanes have done, especially the ones that are improved, more than just a white line on the street, is they've made traffic calm. People go slower and move faster through an area because it goes slower. It's made it safer for pedestrians to cross the street and to walk along the street. And one of the things on 4th and 5th is when there's fewer, maybe there's not as many bicyclists as we would hope. There are people who push baby buggies in the bike lanes, which I think is good because they're separated. And there's a safer environment for people to cross the street because cars are not zooming the way they used to. And when we put those in, people thought you'd never be able to get from Hillcrest to downtown anymore because we're putting a bike lane in. And that turned out to be not true because cars can move much more effectively in the narrower lanes and the fewer lanes. So we need to look at it in the total mobility environment, just not how many people are riding a bike.
And the city of San Diego has been, their new guidelines for intersection planning and road planning, they are looking at it as a complete system. I focused on bicycles because that's what I'm interested in, but when they add these, they have ways to increase visibility at intersections for pedestrians. It's basically pulling the curb right up to the driving lane, so the car and the pedestrian are right adjacent, so they see each other as they're crossing. It's part of building out a complete street, which is important to the city and it's important to mobility.
How would you say the new law about the 20 feet, no parking 20 feet from the intersection is helping?
I've gotten several tickets already for it. So,
Really? You've been ticketed for that?
yeah, I've gotten a few it was early on last, I think it was January when that started.
That helps with visibility.
It does help with
For
visibility.
everybody,
Yeah.
right? Motorists, cyclists, pedestrians.
I put in to get it done to paint the curb by my cross street, which is a stoplight, and Claremont Drive. And finally, yes, a couple days ago, I got a thing back saying, we've gone out and checked out your such and such, and we'll be painting that curb red. Thanks.
At some of the intersections, the radius of the curve is such you can't figure out where the 20 feet is.
Well, so what, if it's 18 and 19
No, but you
feet, it's
can't,
still,
where do you actually know if it's?
the city will figure that out.
But wasn't the
How do you,
idea
how well do traffic circles work for bicycles?
I love them. The reason being is that, and I keep going back to,
They calm the traffic. People don't know how to drive.
yeah, the most frustrating thing is when somebody stops at a traffic circle and I'm also trying to get back into the traffic or into the bike lane and there's somebody stopped here but there's nobody coming across. But at the same time, somebody coming the other direction can continue going, I can go straight or turn. I think it slows down the traffic, which is the biggest thing. And like here, you are racing between stoplights. Here, you're consistently going 15 or 20 miles an hour. It's much slower, it's closer to the speed of a bicycle. And when you go slower, it's just easier to see things. But in my opinion, I think the traffic circles are a really good part of the bicycle boulevard design that San Diego's been working on. All right.
So, thank you, Nate, that's great. We have a gift for you, but it isn't here yet, so.
It's a brand new bicycle.
Bike club.
Bike club.